What the hell kind of manager tells a driver to speed through red lights to make more trips? Mason Nolan had heard a lot in his 20 years of building his rideshare company, from a beat-up Crown Vic to a 6-location fleet spanning 3 states, but this voicemail from his district coordinator made his jaw clench. The call wasn't even about the red lights. It was about driver complaints, customer refunds, and 2 station managers fighting over vehicle shortages. And the worst part? Mason didn't know who to believe anymore. He used to know every name, every car, every route. Now, he sat 3 floors up in a downtown office watching performance charts and customer review spreadsheets. He hated it. Every week it felt like one more layer stacked between him and the truth. So when the district coordinator told him that the Southside station, the busiest of the 6, had been bleeding drivers for weeks, Mason didn't request another report. He decided to drive. He found an old uniform navy blue polo, faded jeans, ball cap pulled low. He updated a dummy profile on the app, used one of the unbranded backup sedans, and signed himself up for the evening shift. Nobody at Southside had ever met him in person. The company had grown too fast. He hired upper-level staff to oversee the stations, and they hired everyone else. His photo was never posted anywhere. To his drivers, he was just a name in an email. That night, Mason rolled into the Southside lot just after 5. The place looked worn. The chain-link fence had a hole zip-tied shut. A few drivers leaned against their cars, scrolling their phones. Nobody looked happy. A tall guy with a clipboard and a Bluetooth earpiece barked. "You the new fill-in? From West Loop?" Mason nodded. "Yeah." "Name's Mike. Late. Whatever. That's your car. Don't wreck it. And if dispatch tells you to double back for a pickup, you do it. Got it?" "Sure," Mason said, noting the guy's name tag. Logan. He was the Southside manager. Arrogant from the jump. Mason got into the sedan and pulled out of the lot. The car smelled like cologne and old fries. 40 minutes into his shift, he picked up a young woman in a bookstore uniform and a man in a suit. They sat in the back, barely acknowledged him. About 5 minutes into the ride, the woman leaned toward the man and whispered, "Did you see what happened to Camila last week?" Mason's ears perked up. He kept his eyes on the road. "She missed a shift 'cause her mom was in the hospital," the man replied. "Logan told her if she pulled that again, he'd cut her hours to 0. The woman scoffed. "She's been here 3 years. I saw her training new drivers last month. That's how he treats loyalty?" Mason's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "And the stuff he says about the older drivers?" the man added. "It's gross. Like, no one wants to ride with a 50-year-old in a busted Honda." "Yeah. He's been pushing them out. Quietly. Not firing, but no shifts, no updates. Just silence." Mason's chest burned. He pulled over at the drop-off point and the passengers got out, still talking. He sat in the car for a second, stunned. He built this company so people could make a living. Camila was one of the first hires at Southside. He remembered her name from the launch crew list. She'd been one of the dependable ones. He hadn't seen her name in a long time. Mason tapped the dashboard. Time to see more. He drove for another 3 hours. Picked up a college kid who said drivers had to beg for decent shifts. A mom who mentioned how rude dispatch had been when she asked for a refund. 2 drivers at a gas station complained about the GPS system always being accidentally down during peak hours. At 9, Mason returned to the lot. Logan was berating a driver. "I don't care if your kid is sick. You leave mid-shift again and I'll make sure you don't get another route all month." Mason parked and walked past them, pretending he didn't hear. The driver, a woman in her 30s, looked down, biting her lip. Inside the dispatch trailer, a girl barely out of high school was fielding calls with a headset. "You're not even trained," Mason said quietly after she hung up. She flinched. "Logan said I'd learn faster this way." Mason nodded. "You okay?" She looked at him for a second, then nodded too. Just tired. By the time he left, Mason had heard enough to know something was rotten. But he needed proof. Something he could bring back without it sounding like a vendetta. The next day, Mason did another shift. Midway through, he picked up 2 teenage boys from the mall. They were laughing, shoving each other. "Yo, remember that one guy who tried to report Logan?" one said. "Yeah, that old dude with the limp. What happened to him?" "Gone. Fired or something. Logan said he was bad optics." They laughed again. "He said rideshares for young, hot people. Not walking corpses." Mason's stomach dropped. The boys weren't lying. They were repeating what they'd heard. Logan wasn't just a bad manager. He was dangerous. He dropped them off, pulled into the nearest parking lot, and sat still for a long time. His phone buzzed. A message from the district coordinator. "Let me know what you find." Mason stared out the windshield. He'd found it. Now he had to decide what to do with it. The third night, Mason didn't take any passengers. He parked 2 blocks from the Southside station and waited until the lot emptied after the evening rush. By 10, most of the drivers had clocked out. A few cars remained, one with a cracked taillight, another idling with someone inside eating off a fast food wrapper. He slipped into the dispatch trailer, unnoticed. The trainee from before Kayla sat slumped at the console, elbow on the desk, scrolling through route logs with one hand while holding her headset in place with the other. Her eyes were glassy, lips pressed tight. She hadn't noticed him. "Launch shift?" Mason asked gently. She startled and turned, pulling off the headset. "I thought everyone was out. I'm running maintenance on one of the backups. Logan told me to wait until late." She rubbed her forehead. "That sounds like him." Mason nodded toward the console. "You dispatching alone again?" She hesitated. "Yeah. Logan says cross-training saves payroll. Said if I can't keep up, someone else will." Mason leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "That sound like leadership to you?" She glanced at him, unsure if he was joking. He didn't blink. "How long you been here?" 3 weeks. I needed the money. I didn't think it would be like this." Mason looked at the cluttered monitor. The system was lagging. Half the driver icons were frozen in place. "That mess up often?" "Every night. We can't afford the software update. Or that's what Logan says. So. I guess this is normal." Mason checked the time. "You ever get a break?" She shook her head. "Only if things slow down. Last night I worked through dinner. I didn't even notice." He nodded once. "You got a notebook or anything?" Kayla reached under the desk and handed him a stained spiral pad. Mason flipped through it. Notes, scribbled times, shift swaps, call complaints. In the margins, tally marks. "What are these?" he asked. The number of drivers who quit mid-shift or no-showed. Mason ran his finger down the page. "This week alone?" "Yeah." "Why keep count?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I guess it made me feel less crazy." He handed the notebook back. "Keep doing it." She gave him a wary look. "Why do you care?" Mason picked up a dispatch headset, turned it over in his hand. "Because a company that lets this happen doesn't deserve people like you." Before she could respond, Logan's voice erupted from the entrance behind them. "Mike, what the hell are you doing in here?" Mason turned slowly. "Waiting on a system check? Thought I'd see how this side worked." Logan narrowed his eyes. "You're not cleared to be in dispatch." "Get out." Kayla shrank in her chair. Mason held Logan's stare. "Didn't realize this was restricted." "It is. You want ours, follow the chain of command. Don't go snooping around trying to impress anyone." Mason walked past him, pausing just enough to look him in the eye. A good command chain doesn't need to be afraid of someone asking questions. Logan didn't answer. Just watched him with a tight jaw as he stepped outside. The next morning, Mason drove to the West Loop station, where his operations director Leah was based. She'd been with him since the 3rd year of the company. Smart, precise, loyal. She didn't waste time with fluff. He met her in the garage, where she was reviewing maintenance records with a clipboard tucked under her arm. "I need a favor," he said. "You look like hell. Been driving nights?" She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. "What kind of favor?" "I need access to Southside's driver logs, internal memos, and dispatch recordings from the last 30 days. Quietly. Her face tightened. "You think someone's cooking numbers?" "I think someone's running that station like it's their personal playground." She looked around, lowered her voice. "Mason, you want to tell me what's going on?" He hesitated. "Not yet. But I need to know everything that's gone through that station. Especially shift assignments, route denials, and early terminations." Leah studied him, then nodded once. "I'll have it by tonight." He turned to go, but she stopped him. "You're not doing this just because of numbers, are you?" Mason didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, he returned to Southside. Logan wasn't on site. A different supervisor, a guy named Darryl, was covering the late shift. Darryl was older, slower moving, but polite. He handed Mason a key without any attitude. "The sedan's running a little rough," he said. "If it acts up, bring it back early." Mason nodded and hit the road. No passengers this time. He drove the loop routes, checking the GPS accuracy, noting how often the signal dropped. He stopped at every pickup spot listed on the app's backend to verify if they were still active. 2 had been closed for months. 1 had been replaced by a construction site. At a downtown intersection, he spotted a driver pulled over with hazard lights on. Mason stopped behind him and got out. The man was in his 50s, wiry, with deeply lined hands and a badge that read, "Reggie." The hood was up. Steam hissed from the radiator. "Need a hand?" Mason asked. Reggie wiped his forehead. "Only if you've got a miracle." Mason looked under the hood. The coolant line was split. He stepped back. "You report this?" "Twice. Dispatch told me to run it until it fails. I guess we're there now." "You been with the company long?" "Since the beginning. Used to do airport runs. But lately I'm lucky to get 5 shifts a week." "Any idea why?" Reggie gave a tired laugh. "Depends who you ask. Some say Logan's got a thing about image. Says the older drivers slow down customer ratings." Mason stared at the engine. "You think that's fair?" Reggie shrugged. "Fair doesn't matter. Rent does." Mason helped him push the car to the curb and offered him a ride. Reggie declined. Said he'd wait for the tow. Back at the lot, Mason parked and sat in the car, engine off. His phone buzzed. Leah had sent a document folder. He scrolled through the files. Shift logs showed a pattern: certain drivers repeatedly assigned the worst routes or none at all. Dispatch recordings included Logan berating drivers, mocking accents, laughing about cleaning house. There was even a flagged incident report from 3 weeks ago. A driver named Camila had filed a formal complaint after being pressured to work through a family emergency. The response from Logan was a single line: "Consider her unreliable." Mason closed the file, fingers tight around the phone. He had enough. But one more night wouldn't hurt. The next evening, he took a route deep into the industrial district. Not many passengers, but drivers often complained about this zone being used as a punishment shift. He pulled into a gas station just past midnight. A young man in a company jacket leaned against a pump, arms folded. "You on Logan's blacklist too?" he asked. Mason tilted his head. "Didn't know there was a list." The man laughed bitterly. "If you ask questions, take too long, or suggest better routes, you're on it. Next thing you know, you're on night runs out here where nobody tips and half the stops are fake." Mason pointed to his ID badge. "You're Leo, right?" He frowned. "How do you? I've heard your name around." Leo narrowed his eyes. "You're not just a driver, are you?" Mason nodded slowly. "Not exactly. Leo looked at him for a long moment, then snorted. You know what's funny? I used to believe in this company. I told my brother to apply here. He quit after 2 weeks. Said it felt like being managed by a bully with a god complex. Mason leaned against the car. What would you change if you could? Leo didn't hesitate. Listen to us. Actually listen. Not just surveys. We know the roads. We know what works. And we know who's toxic. Mason nodded. Thanks. He left him there, still leaning against the pump, watching the empty road. By the time Mason returned to the lot, the sun was breaking over the east side. The chain-link fence rattled in the wind. Inside his chest, something had settled. He would be back tomorrow. But not as Mike. Mason arrived at the Southside station just after noon, no uniform, no cap, just a pressed button down and a clipboard. He parked in one of the visitor spots near the entrance, the same lot where the broken fence flapped in the breeze. This time, he didn't hide. Inside the dispatch trailer, Kayla sat at the console again, eyes darting between monitors as she juggled 2 calls. She froze when she saw him, headset slipping slightly from her ear. Morning, Mason said, voice calm. You can hang up. She fumbled with the call, then took the headset off. Is something wrong? No, Mason said. But things are about to change. Her eyes flicked to the logo on his shirt. It was the first time she saw the company emblem worn clean and embroidered. She blinked once, then again, realization starting to form. He gave her a nod. You don't need to say anything. Just sit tight. Mason stepped out into the lot where a cluster of drivers waited for their shift assignments. Most of them leaned against their cars or stood in uncomfortable silence, watching the dispatch door for signs of movement. 2 of them, Reggie and Leo, were among them. Neither recognized him yet. Logan exited the side office, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, scrolling his phone. He didn't notice Mason until he was halfway across the lot. Hey, Logan called out, still not looking up. You're not supposed to be back here. This lot's for staff and drivers. Mason didn't stop walking. You're right. I'm here in a staff capacity. Logan finally looked up from his phone. His brow furrowed. Who are you? Mason stopped 3 feet from him. You know me as Mike. But my full name is Mason Nolan. Logan's grip on his coffee tightened. His voice dropped slightly. I'm the founder, Mason said. And you've got 5 minutes to get everyone in the garage for a meeting. You'll want to be there too. Logan looked around the lot. No one moved. No one spoke. I don't think this is the right way to 4 minutes. Logan held his stare, then turned and disappeared into the office. 15 minutes later, the garage floor was packed. Folding chairs lined up hastily in 2 rows, others standing against the walls. The air was thick, some of it confusion, some of it dread. Drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, even Darryl, the night shift supervisor, stood near the back. Mason stood in front, clipboard under one arm, Leah beside him. She'd driven in that morning with a stack of printed reports and a file folder packed with evidence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. For the past 3 nights, Mason began, I've been working shifts out of this station. I've driven alongside you, spoken with passengers, reviewed internal systems, and walked this lot after midnight. I've heard things I never expected to hear inside a company that bears my name. A few people shifted in their seats. Reggie crossed his arms. Kayla stood just behind the last row, her face pale. I've seen dispatch logs altered. I've seen routes manipulated. I've reviewed dozens of shift assignments that deliberately excluded certain drivers. I've listened to recordings of staff being insulted, threatened, and ignored. And I've spoken with passengers who used one word to describe their experience here: neglected. Leo stood near the left wall, jaw tight. He didn't blink. Mason turned to the front row, where Logan sat stiffly, hands drumming on his knees. You've been running this station for how long? Logan cleared his throat. 18 months. In that time, Over 40 drivers have left mid-month. 17 cited mistreatment in their exit notes, which were never escalated. 9 reported technical outages that you failed to log. And at least 3 dispatch trainees were left to handle peak traffic hours unsupervised. I followed protocol, Logan said quickly. There's no evidence. Leah stepped forward, handed Mason a folder, which he held up. These are recordings from dispatch, shift audits, and vehicle maintenance reports. Many were edited before being sent to corporate. The originals were still stored in the local system. We have a legal obligation to maintain transparency in labor scheduling. What you've done violates that. Logan's shoulders tensed. You're overreacting. Mason walked toward him, stopping just short. You told the driver she was unreliable for missing a shift to visit her dying mother. You told another he was too old to represent the company. You assigned punishment routes to employees who asked for assistance. And you told dispatch to ignore downtime reports because software bugs don't matter if the driver hustles. Logan stood abruptly. I've kept this station running. I've hit every quota. I've delivered results. At what cost? Mason asked. Burning out the people who actually move the wheels. The room was silent. Logan looked around but found no support. You're suspended effective immediately, Mason said. Leah will oversee transition. HR will follow up within 48 hours. Logan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. After a moment, he walked quickly toward the exit, phone already in hand. No one stopped him. Mason turned back to the group. I owe every one of you an apology. This station should never have reached this point. That's on me. I trusted a system that was supposed to protect you, and it failed. I failed. No one spoke. Some stared at the floor. Others watched him, waiting. I'm not here to give you a pep talk or promise overnight fixes. But I will tell you this, things will change and not just here. Starting today, every station will undergo an audit. Not just of numbers, but of how people are treated. Because this company was built by drivers, not managers. And if we forget that, we lose everything. He looked at Kayla. You'll be moved to the West Loop station for formal dispatch training under our senior staff. You'll be paid for the overtime you weren't offered, and your notes, the ones you kept, will be used to rebuild this station's schedule system. Her eyes widened, but she nodded. Mason turned to Reggie. You'll be offered a new vehicle assignment. Full maintenance. No more half fixes. You've earned that. Reggie didn't speak. He just gave a small nod, eyes steady. He looked at Leo next. You've got field experience and a clear grasp of what's broken here. If you're willing, I'd like you to join the station council we're forming. No titles. Just advisory. You'll help us rebuild policy from the ground up. Leo's jaw worked for a moment before he gave a short, surprised laugh. Yeah. All right. Mason stepped back. I'll be here for the next week. Not as a driver. Not behind a desk. Just here. Watching. Listening. Learning. You deserve leadership that shows up, not hides behind reports. He paused. If any of you have something to say, something that's been ignored or dismissed, now's the time. Darrow raised a hand. You want the truth? I do. The night shift's been understaffed for over 2 months. I've been covering 2 roles. Dispatch and vehicle intake. Some nights I sleep in that damn chair. I've filed 3 requests. No one answered. Mason turned to Leah. Fix it. She nodded, already jotting notes. Another driver spoke up. We've got no standardized route training. Every new hire learns something different. It's chaos. Document everything you know, Mason said. We'll pay you for the time. And we'll use it to build a real training system. A mechanic raised his hand. The parts budget's been slashed. We're patching tires instead of replacing them. That's not safe. That ends today, Mason said. You'll get a full inventory review and a new order window. The floodgates opened. Complaints, suggestions, questions pouring out all at once. Mason didn't stop them. He took each one down or passed it to Leah. No promises he couldn't keep. No sugarcoating. Just acknowledgement and action. By the time the meeting ended, the air had shifted. Not to celebration. Not yet. But something closer to relief. As the crowd dispersed, Kayla stepped up beside him. "You didn't have to come here yourself," she said. "I did," Mason replied. "Because nothing changes unless it starts with the person at the top." She nodded and returned to the trailer. Mason stood in the garage doorway and watched the lot. Reggie was checking under a hood with one of the mechanics. Leo was talking to two younger drivers, gesturing toward the route map. The fence still needed fixing. The shed still leaned at an odd angle. But the silence was gone. Tomorrow, he'd be back. Not to inspect. To rebuild. 3 weeks had passed since Mason revealed who he was. The Southside station still looked rough around the edges, faded paint, cracked pavement, a sagging storage shed, but inside, routines were shifting. Slowly. Not perfectly. But visibly. The first thing Mason had done was stop pretending all the solutions could come from him. He'd assigned Leah full authority to lead restructuring on site, but he stayed close, working out of a folding table in the dispatch trailer, not a distant office. His presence made people cautious at first, then curious, and eventually, comfortable enough to speak freely. It was early Tuesday when Mason found himself standing in front of the whiteboard that now served as the station's open suggestion board. A few notes were scribbled in different handwriting, some neat, others rushed. "Update GPS zones for new construction on 67th. Hire someone to coordinate car maintenance before 4 p.m. shifts. Back gate latch still sticks. Slows everyone down." Nothing dramatic. Just real problems. Real voices. He heard the door open behind him. "You've got a minute?" It was Leo, clipboard in hand. He wore a light windbreaker now, not the standard company fleece. A small distinction, but one Mason had noticed, like he was easing into this advisory role without fully declaring it. "Yeah," Mason said, turning from the board. "What's going on?" Leo stepped forward. "I talked with the overnight crew. They're saying the new dispatch trainee Trina, she's sharp, but she's getting overwhelmed. She's pulling solo coverage again because Daryl's still clocking out early. Says his back's flaring up." Mason frowned. "Has he said anything to you directly?" "No, but one of the drivers saw him wincing during intake. Looked like he was trying to hide it." Mason nodded. "All right. I'll talk to him. We might need to bring in someone from West Loop for backup until we sort coverage." Leo looked like he wanted to say something else, then added, "Also, Kayla's requesting access to real-time route cancellations. Says she can't troubleshoot when dispatch doesn't see pullouts until the end of the shift. That's a system permission issue," Mason said. "I'll get IT to adjust her access." Leo gave a short nod and turned to go, but Mason stopped him. "How are the newer drivers responding to the council check-ins?" "They're still skeptical. Some of them think we're just relabeling middle management." "Let them think that," Mason said. "We're not here to win them over with titles. Let them see the results." When Leo left, Mason stepped outside. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of exhaust and fast food from the neighboring strip mall. He crossed the lot to the garage, where Reggie stood near the lift, gloves on, replacing a brake pad on one of the older sedans. "You got a second?" Mason asked. Reggie didn't look up. "Depends." "You about to tell me we're out of parts again?" "No. We're stocked. Leah made sure of that last Friday." That got Reggie's attention. He stood and wiped grease from his hands. Mason continued, "I'm checking in on Daryl. Heard his back might be acting up." Reggie nodded slowly. "He's been moving slower. Doesn't want to admit it, but I've seen him lean against the wall when he thinks no one's looking. We might need to shift him off nights. Maybe give him a floating role." Reggie raised an eyebrow. "He's not going to take that easy. He's proud. I get that, Mason said. But pride doesn't cover safety gaps. We can't keep running night dispatch on half a crew. Reggie hesitated, then asked, You planning to hire someone green or someone who's done nights before? Someone who's driven the routes. Preferably from inside the team. Reggie nodded toward the back corner of the garage. Talk to Amira. She's been doing late shifts for 2 years. Knows the rhythm better than anyone. Just doesn't make noise about it. Mason made a mental note. Appreciate that. As he turned to leave, Reggie added, You're doing it different. I noticed. Mason paused. Doing what? Listening. Not just waiting to talk. That's new. Mason gave a quiet nod and walked back across the lot, boots crunching over gravel where the pavement had worn thin. By mid-afternoon, he found Darryl in the small break room, hunched over a bowl of chili and rubbing the base of his spine. Mason sat across from him. You all right? Darryl looked up, eyes tired. Just sore. Been sore all season. You've been leaving early. I wasn't trying to skip out, he said, defensive. Just figured if dispatch was quiet, I could turn in early and save the strain. I get it, Mason said. But we've got a trainee pulling double coverage without backup. Darryl sighed. Didn't mean for her to carry the load. I'm not looking to pull your hours. But we need a sustainable plan. What if we moved you to equipment intake during the day? Less rush. You'd still be on payroll, but with a lighter load. Darryl looked down at the table. You're not just pushing me out. No, Mason said plainly. I'm making sure the station doesn't fall apart because one guy's too stubborn to rest. Darryl gave a dry chuckle. Fair enough. They shook on it. By the end of the week, Amira had taken a shadow shift with Kayla in dispatch. She was quiet, methodical, and caught a routing error that had gone unnoticed for 3 days. By the second night, she was running the board herself. Mason watched it unfold from the back of the room. She didn't ask for recognition. She just did the work. In the driver lounge, which now had fresh coffee and working air conditioning thanks to Leah's fast coordination, a few of the newer hires were comparing notes on the updated route map. Who fixed the 67th loop? One asked. Amira logged it, the other said. She had dispatch rerouted after the construction detour. About time someone noticed. Mason caught the exchange but didn't interrupt. Let them credit the right people. That was the point. The final test came at the end of the month when a citywide protest rerouted traffic across the southern corridor. It was a logistical nightmare: blocked roads, delayed pickups, angry passengers. In previous weeks, Southside would have buckled. This time, dispatch pivoted in under 30 minutes. Kayla and Amira rerouted active drivers, Leo coordinated with 2 other stations to cover spillover, and Reggie ran idle vehicle checks to make sure none overheated during the detours. By midnight they were back on schedule. No one celebrated. They just exhaled and kept moving. The next morning, Mason called a brief meeting in the garage. No chairs. Just standing room. This month wasn't easy, he said. And we're not done. But I've seen what matters most. Not just correction, but consistency. You've shown up. You've adjusted. You've held each other accountable. He looked around. That's what sustainability looks like. Not perfection. Just people thinking beyond themselves. No applause. Just nods. And that was enough. Later that day, Mason packed up the folding table in dispatch. He left a note for Kayla. The desk is yours now. Make it count. Outside, he passed the lot where the fence had finally been replaced. Simple steel posts, no more zip ties. Leo was walking the perimeter, doing a vehicle check with 2 new hires. Reggie was under another hood. Darryl sat on a bench near the intake lane, clipboard in hand, sipping a thermos of tea. Mason took one last walk around the station. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. He slipped into an unmarked sedan parked near the exit. The same one he'd used weeks ago as Mike. The seats had been cleaned. The GPS now ran without freezing. He pulled out onto the road and drove past a bus stop where a passenger waited in a bookstore uniform, checking the app on her phone. She didn't recognize him. She didn't need to. The system was working again. And this time, it wasn't because of one man at the top. It was because he finally remembered what it meant to be on the ground.